It's 3:03 by the internet, and I'll call the meeting to order. A quorum being present, the meeting being duly constituted, we're ready to go. The first order of business on the agenda is the approval of the agenda. May I have a motion?
Your Worship, could I interrupt one moment?
Please.
We have an amendment to that agenda. We were unable to find a rationale to include the standing committee reports in the closed section of this meeting, so we would like to move to place it on the open agenda for tonight.
Which topic?
Sorry? The closed
Which was the topic?
Page 5 of 6, Mayor's report to council.
Thank you.
The rationale for that
5 of 6, yes.
was that it was to do, first of all, it is most certainly a strategy committee topic because it's a discussion, it's not a resolution. It's something that I want to discuss with council, and it's
There's personnel and
it's personnel.
personalities.
Yeah.
I don't see anything in here that makes it confidential, though. We're only discussing the councillors that are on each of the committees, and that's public information.
Yeah.
I think on item 4, Mayor Burr was again looking for consensus.
Yeah, that's right. And I don't, this was not written with a view for public dissemination. There's rationales for council's eyes on this one to do with...
And there was also some guidance on next steps on this one too.
Yeah, precisely. So if you tell me this is not confidentialable, to coin a phrase, we'll have to defer it, because I don't want to bring this out now for some of the issues that are being discussed. It's to do with resident members of committees. It's to do with...
the memo doesn't, or the report doesn't include any of that information, so it's from the report, it's really difficult to justify this.
Okay, I would have preferred to have known about this beforehand and given you the justification. But
could we add it in verbatim when we get to the in-camera interim CAO?
Pardon me? Can we...
Could we specify
reporting out?
Camera. Yeah.
No, because I'm hearing there's nothing that there's nothing under the charter, section 251 or whatever it is, that allows us to close to discuss this.
So then your suggestion is that we do this in open tonight?
Well, His Worship was actually more correct. I had intended to suggest that it be moved to the open portion of this meeting, but another option is to defer and consider how...
Defer would be fine. I mean, I think we know what's going to happen. So then we're just doing the nicety part. Yeah.
Yeah, clearly if this is, I would, yeah, okay. Fine, so
we're going to have to wriggle out of this one somehow.
Yeah. I mean, this discussion is all open as well, of course. So that means to strike 9 and 10 from the agenda.
That would be correct.
Okay.
We would still have a closed meeting, though. There are other things on
Oh, are there?
So we wouldn't strike 9 and 10.
There is?
Number 6.
There's all the new business items.
Right.
Yeah, fine. So we will
just delete D.
When we get to approval of the agenda of the closed meeting.
Yep.
Okay, that's a little cleaner as well, a little more transparent. Okay, so can I have a motion and a second? All in favour? Opposed? Carried. Participation? Seeing none, we'll carry on to adoption of the minutes of the May 5th Council Strategy Committee. Pretty simple stuff. Anything?
I have no changes.
Okay. Can you give us a motion? Second? All in favour of adoption? Opposed? Carries. And business arising from the minutes. I don't believe there were any action items. No, so there being none, we'll move on to unfinished business, and that is the council priority list, page 5. Councillor Waterson.
So actually, at our last meeting, I presented this priority list, and I asked if the rest of council can come back with any amendments or comments. with regards to this list?
I think you asked for that before the meeting. I didn't have any changes, although if I can have 30 seconds of latitude, remember, it's the piece about the sustainable community. I understand in spirit what we're talking about, but the sustainable part of the community that I'm thinking of is what we do with Metro, the garbage, the waste. I'm thinking the other stuff that we do that would be sustainable would be electrical use, fossil fuel use, and I'm struggling to come up with anything else. We do the Bear Smart and a whole bunch of other stuff.
Would it be long-term
I'm worried about
viability?
I'm worried about it being a key point of our platform, that somebody comes forward and asks us to switch to diesel engines versus fuel on the trucks, or something being more carbon friendly or something like that.
Yeah, I tend to agree. I mean,
because I don't know where the trap door is here.
Yeah, and it's sort of mixing metaphors. To me, sustainable means ensuring there is a Lions Bay.
Mm-hmm.
This then segues into talking about environmental concerns.
I mean, it's an environmental community, or environmentally proficient or something. I mean, I'm not doing your wordsmithing for you. But I've shot my bolt on that.
I think we discussed the long-term viability of Lions Bay, not necessarily from just an environmental position. So maybe then.
Yeah, but I don't recall this from our strategy document.
This was the blurb wasn't. I just put that in there.
Yeah, but that's
as
not
a talking
what we
point.
prioritized. We prioritized sustainable community meant something else entirely in the document. You don't happen to have the? It should be on the website. Is it?
What is
the council priority document?
Yeah.
Because it didn't explain it, so that's why I added it.
In the annual report.
In the annual report.
Yeah, which is on the website.
Yeah, so, and I apologize, I should have done something about this. The only comment I made was valuing volunteers, just to keep the grammatical tense correct. But I am concerned that point 3 is not what the priority document, what the...
I think point 3 just said that we would be a leader in creating a sustainable community, and it didn't really...
I don't think it said anything about it being a leader.
Oh.
Where is it, Shauna? Under what?
I'm just looking for it.
Local government? Municipal services? Annual reports. Haha. 2014 annual reports. I don't propose that we necessarily go back and forth on this one right now, but I would like to get this done so that we can achieve your goal on this one. And the council priority says Lions Bay will strive to create a sustainable community of the future, and the details in that are support Lions Bay Elementary School, Lions Bay before and after school program and early years childcare, fund and deliver an IMP and prepare shovel-ready RFPs, review land use and zoning strategy with a view to encouraging development opportunities acceptable to the wider community, focus on Brunswick Hill and Crystal Falls. Nothing to do with environmental.
Yeah, I think that, okay, I think the leader thing.
Don't they?
Yeah, well, the second one, high livability, was install a staff community coordinator, trees, views and landscapes bylaw, new building bylaw, improved parking, public work service levels for value to residents, and changing community needs through a resident poll and survey. Which is adequately summarized by the thing underneath that. But the third one was not what we had stated.
So just put that.
Well, it's good to explain it.
Yeah, that's what I'm thinking. So I did find this, but then I go, how do we?
It's a little on the micro side. Yours is a very 20,000 foot statement.
Yeah, but I certainly didn't subscribe to. Not that I don't, but that wasn't one of our priorities. The environmental thing was more high livability on the high livability side. So I don't want to mix the messages here. Sustainable community is not what it says here.
How about if we ask this for council to for sure take away and respond to Councillor Waterston this week on this
Can we just
point?
if we just put that?
Yeah, but I think it's good to have it explained.
Yeah. So how do? And I couldn't figure out how to
well,
explain
you
it.
summarize that. Deliver programs that deliver the sustainability of the community. Sustainability meaning future of, rather than environmental compliance.
Okay.
And I'll just point out one of the things we haven't really talked about. It's in the OCP and it's required by Metro is that we've got to attain carbon targets.
I'm worried about that because it has reared its head before,
Mm-hmm.
and
And we have no
It's-
control of the
and we
highway,
have no control.
yet we're dinged for the highway.
And there's reason, anyhow.
And I will be using that argument when I'm discussing with the powers that be about reducing speed, not the speed limit, but actually reducing speed on the highway, to say we have to be given a means to achieve our carbon targets. Okay,
Okay, so I'll reword it,
yeah. And the other one was
valuing.
value volunteers. rather than
Value.
Value. Well, yeah, I think just to get the tense right. Okay, so I know that's not a completely satisfactory result because it doesn't nail it down, but we're getting there.
Okay.
We're moving in on the target. So are you good to move on?
Yep.
Okay. So new business. The first being discussion of council remuneration bylaw on page 7. Okay, this was staff thing. Pam, is this something you want to talk to? Please talk.
Just the history of this bylaw, it went for first, second, and third reading in January, and then we rescinded third reading in May because of a couple of concerns about some of the wording and also what the annual increases in the remuneration would be based on. Because the CPI can actually go down year over year. So I had addressed that by suggesting we use the BC, be a little more specific, the BC Consumer Price Index. And in years where there was a negative CPI change, the council remuneration would be the same. So that's one option. I mean, there are other options. That would mean for this year just a 0.77% increase. If you looked at the increase in the BC CPI, it would be slightly higher if we'd use the Canada-wide CPI. And then,
And?
sorry, yes, there's a bit more formal. CAO, Yansu, had mentioned that at Valmont, they had set a percent based on sort of the average of the CPI, which had been 2%. And they had said
Over a
to set
10-year average.
Over a 10-year average, they had just set it at 2%. It could be at mayor and council's discretion each year. There's a couple of varieties. So I really introduced this just so that we can examine it again, discuss what council would like to see. And I may have to change the wording again, but I wanted to sort of say that the base in 2014 was this amount, so that there could perhaps be an increase in 2015. But then we may have to change the wording because it can't be retroactive, the increase. So it still needs a bit of work, but I sort of wanted to get a sense of what mayor and council was looking for in their council remuneration bylaw.
Yeah, okay, thank you. Councillors? Well, I'll go ahead, Ron.
Let's just arbitrarily pick a point for the CPI and BC as an example. For my comp, that represents about $55. It's not a big number for me now, or I'm going to guess for future generations of councillors. If under the mayor's leadership today or tomorrow, if compensation was going to be changed materially, it'd be put forward, council would discuss it, and it would happen or be voted on. So I think, minimizing our time on this, staff's recommendation is fine as it sits.
Helen?
I'm just not sure about this wording, and it's where it says January 1st and shall be based on the percentage, the BC Consumer Price Index, so whatever the percentage of the CPI that year.
Positive percentage.
Increased over the year, so there's a CPI rate posted monthly, so we would take January of 2014 versus January of 2015, calculate what the increase was, and that would be your increase in remuneration. Sometimes the CPI goes down, so in that was my concern with the way it was originally worded. In that case, your salary would stay the same.
My concern there is that if it does go down in 1 year and then the next year we get a 2% increase, that's 2% on the down year, which means that we never lose. It should be, meaning that it's maybe a 5% increase on the last time we had an increase. So I could see doing it as a roll. Frankly, it doesn't really matter. None of us are what's the need for a CPI increase? You know, the $6,000 or $13,000 is getting paid is not compensating us for anything. It's an honorarium. It's a stipend. It's what's the, you know, it's not what we're living on. So I mean, I can actually see just leaving it as a fixed number and increasing it every now and again by schedule or council resolution. You know, the whole concept of CPI increase. I mean, what?
I mean, that's only one mean. We could have a set percentage, or we could just say to be reviewed annually by mayor and council.
That's always fraught, of course, because you know council's rewarding, rewarding itself. So that's difficult as well. So this is why people do it. It's, you know, hey, it's out of our control. But on the other hand, you know, if the CPI goes down, why don't we decrease the stipend? What do we need it to increase for?
Could I make a comment here, Your Worship? In benchmarking councillor stipends here against stipends for other communities of similar sizes, yours are relatively modest. So you may want to be cautious around decreasing that. You may end up at the bottom end of those communities of comparable sizes.
You know, hey, I'll take $10 to buy a beer any time, but you know, what difference does it make? You know, $14,000 or $13,000 ain't gonna keep the wolf from the door. So yeah, I take your point. I don't really want to be deciding on comp every year because just the optics are not great.
I'm of the same view. I think one and done here. And if it was so raging inflation, should the country be so lucky?
Yeah, precisely.
That it would come forward again.
So how about just saying based on the change in the BC Consumer Price Index?
Or I guess BC or Metro, something close
Oh.
to
Is it based on the change or is it based on the consumer price index?
change.
It's based on the change.
The change from year to year.
Yeah. I mean, it would be unusual to lower salary. I mean, I think I would.
Yeah, but it's not a salary, it's an honorarium. It's saying
Well,
thanks
still,
for...
it's a method of payment, and it would be unusual for it to decline.
I've had my salary decline based on economic conditions.
So have I.
Oh yeah. More often than not.
That's just what they tell you.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, I want to make this as easy and not spend too much time on this. My concern is that arithmetically this is problematic because it means that in a down year we stay flat and in an up year we go up, but that's up on the previous down, which means that we don't catch up. Or do
I mean,
we?
you're assuming there's a big leap.
No, if it went down, if it went negative year
If it was -1 in year...
year one, so year 0, there's no
Yeah.
change. Year 2, it goes up 0.7.
From the lower number,
From the lower number, you're still at 0.
still ahead of the game because you never went down.
You never went down.
So
It would just be a calculation of the percent, though, and unless it went down and then leaped up, it would still be a similar percentage.
well, yeah,
Because it
not
would probably just go
arithmetically.
back to-
Arithmetic means we never lose.
We don't lose.
One addition you could make, Your Worship, would be to do a benchmark every, say, 5 years with communities and a set of identified communities that you feel you're comparable to ensure that you remain sort of at an average.
Yeah, you know.
I really don't even want staff to explore other communities.
No, there are no comparable communities really. You know, there's 2 of similar size, kind of, in Metro, but not really because they have an entirely different setup. They get their resources from Port Moody, more or less.
But there are similar jobs.
Well, Ralph Drew, the mayor of Belcarra, spends, he says, about 8 hours a month on the job because he has staff, because they tax higher than we do. The mayor, John McEwen, the mayor of Anmore, complains that it's a time-and-a-half job. He's correct, it is. And he is looking for a stipend of $30,000, and will get it. Not that compensates you for a time-and-a-half job at his level. Anmore is...
Their revenue situation is very different from ours.
Precisely. So, you know, comparables are not really comparable.
Well, it would be like Ashcroft or something like that, just on the size. But
Yeah, but Ashcroft is...
their commercial is staggering.
Yeah,
and
precisely.
ours is zero,
Yeah.
so it'll be tough.
It'd be tough to find comparables, yeah. I mean,
Mayor?
I can go for this, but
Mayor,
it does mean that we
challenge
never
you for a
lose.
time limit on this one.
Okay, thank you. Okay, so let's just leave, this is staff's recommendation. The only thing is we need to change the wording in 3 and 4, of which 1/3 was paid, or is paid, or something, rather than shall be, just to make the wording parallel. Yeah,
Okay.
and the rest, fine. Somebody, no, this is irresponsible. Somebody is going to point out that this means we'll never go down. We always win and we never lose.
But there'll be some years where you don't get an increase. And it's not an automatic increase every year.
And most people would go down if they were
Mayor,
tied to
Mayor,
the
this
seat.
is not a risk reward job.
Okay, don't say I didn't say so.
Okay, you said it.
Okay, all in favour? Oh wait, we don't have a motion. Motion, please. Thanks, in a second. All in favour? Opposed? Carried?
So, Your Worship, can I just clarify for my own benefit then, what the committee is moving on here is to bring this forward to council then?
Yes,
Because this
yes.
committee can't make decisions.
You're right. What am I asking
Oh.
for votes on?
Yeah, that's what I'm
Thank you.
confused about.
Yeah. Scratch all the votes. There's
It
no...
was a discussion
ask
on
the same
just
question.
how you would like to be compensated. So what I'm taking from this is you're happy with the way this is going, in which case.
Happy is a strong word,
There,
but
well, you
yeah.
you are
Could bring us forward in a
okay
regular.
with,
Yeah. So we'll bring this forward as new business in the meeting, in the business meeting, for a third reading.
if I could suggest maybe for the October meeting, because CEO Yansu has correctly pointed out, we might have to tweak some of the wording to make sure that we do allow yourself to give you a raise this year. You were concerned that with some of the wording?
Fine.
That we
Just
have to
some of the
tweak it.
points,
We won't
yeah.
tweak the intent, it was just
Okay.
clarify
In
some
the
of the
meantime,
wording.
I will buy brown bread instead of white
I'll
bread.
probably leave it with you.
Yes, it's,
Okay, thank you. Okay, good. So we're good on that one. Council expense remuneration, page 11. Was this as a result of my request?
This is the, oh, I apologize. Yes.
Okay, my only thing was this
The
is...
existing policy. This is the existing policy,
Yeah.
which we realize we need to update, but because you had brought it forward, we thought, again, it could be something to discuss at this meeting.
Yeah, good. So my only concern was reimbursement for alcohol is not provided. There's, in my case, I've found I've absorbed a lot of alcohol costs spent for official purposes, whether at conferences, entertaining high levels of government, staff gifts, recruitment dinners, all that kind of stuff. I'm happy to continue to absorb the cost out of my stipend, which has just increased. But I want to hear what other people have to say.
I believe the part about the alcohol should be struck.
And there is a part, isn't there?
It's just in one sentence under
Business
business
expense,
expense,
yeah.
one sentence.
Helen?
It's the second sentence.
Yeah.
Well, I don't have any business expenses, so.
Oh, you should.
It'd be fair to say Mayor Burr is representative
Yes.
at all levels and an attraction of personnel and stuff like that, I'm sure he's familiar with the drinking and driving laws, so.
Yeah, this is mostly at things, like at the, not UBCM, the LGMA. We can have a beer together. Well, we did.
Attracting.
I paid for it.
Attracting personnel. Stuff
Well,
like that.
I don't, maybe we don't use liquor for that, but...
Your Worship, could I address a question to the CFO? In the council stipend, does the stipend not clarify that a 30% or so
Yes.
is non?
I had wanted to just remind everyone of that.
Oh, okay.
1/3 shall be paid as an allowance for expenses incidental to the discharge of the office. And I think the assumption is it would come from that. Your mileage within the village, photocopying, printing, just your household, your cell phone, those are all things that you would pay for yourself. And I think the alcohol would come under that. My concern is just speaking as even a taxpayer myself in another district, this perception that my tax dollars are going to pay for alcohol for elected officials. I think perception-wise, this is very common inclusion to have in expense policies. I've even seen them in the private sector where I've worked, that alcohol is not covered.
Yeah, yeah, there may be that perception. You know, perhaps we should stay in the
It's just-
YMCA instead of a hotel. You know, because we're living high on the hog by staying at the Westin. It's all a matter of grades, I suppose. Just back to the third municipal officers allowance. My understanding was that was because it was allowed to be tax-free. It was simply taking advantage of the fact that municipal office stipend is 1/3 non-taxable. Because, yeah, I could make the point, well, I'm just not going to make any photocopies and I'm not going to drive the village business.
Or buy a computer or use your telephone.
Yeah, sorry. I'm going to keep every penny for myself.
You could.
So, I'd like to see it reimbursable. Meaning the third is simply the tax-free portion of the stipend.
I don't think that's the intent. I think it's pretty clear that it's for the
Okay, well, we should change
compensation
that
of,
too then.
it's sort of been my experience at West Vancouver as well. Because you see all the expenses, they have to be reported on the SOFI, and, you know, Mayor and Council did not claim those types of expenses on the SOFI.
Well, there certainly are mayors and councils' expenses on the SOFI, not broken
There are.
down.
They're broken down if requested.
Yeah, okay, so that's one thing that I would like to see in this bylaw 477, is that the 1/3 shall be paid as a municipal officer's allowance.
That's my point. I don't think it can be. For Revenue Canada, it has to be.
It is.
There has to be a reason for it to be tax-free, and it's because you're being compensated for the expenses that you need.
Okay, but I'd like it to state that it's the municipal officer's allowance, and not stipulating what it shall be spent on, which is my business. So the metro stipend that we're paid when we attend metro meetings is 1/3 non-taxable because it's municipal officer's allowance. It is to compensate, I don't know what for.
It's for your mileage, actually, and it's for your expenses of attending those meetings. That's what the intent of it is for.
Okay, so that may be the case in the big city. What do we want to do?
CAO, yeah.
I just wanted to comment that we'll avoid the use of the word officer, though, because officer is an employee.
Maybe it's municipal official. I can't remember what the name of the allowance is.
Yeah, elected official.
Elected official allowance.
Could be.
I know in CRA, I seem to remember that it's when you fill in your tax return, you break down in box 51 municipal officers allowance or municipal something allowance,
Okay.
whatever that's called. I would prefer that to be stipulated as the 1/3
Something
amount.
I would like to get clarification on,
Yeah.
because
What's it for?
there's strict rules, like for example, home office. If you get an allowance for home and office, you then cannot claim on your tax return expenses. So we would have to clarify that if you make this vague, you may not be allowed to then claim your expenses with the municipality. I would want to get a tax opinion on that. It's like double counting. You're being compensated in lieu of expenses, but then you can't also claim the expenses. So if you were suggesting that change, I'm just saying that I would like to
Well,
get
you're
an
right. So,
opinion on that, a tax opinion from our accountants on that.
I think the T&E policy probably needs a bit of updating, because I don't believe any councillor claim in-village mileage, such as it is, but I certainly do claim, as you know. You know, I drive 500, 600, 700 kilometres a month on village business to metro meetings and so on, which I do claim. And, you know, that's $300-400 sometimes. Should I be absorbing that?
Well, it's my understanding that was what the compensation for Metro was for.
Doesn't cover it.
No.
Not even close.
I don't think so.
Not even
It's
close.
not my sense.
Yeah.
I think that's their invitation for us to come.
Yeah. Okay, so I think we're probably going to have to ask staff for some research on this. And this, what is the original?
Yep.
This was 2005, this policy statement, so it's 10 years old. Not that anything's changed. While we're at it, we can update the kilometre reimbursement, which is now 55.5, I think.
Is it?
Current rate, or maybe
It's something like that.
54.5,
Mhm.
something.
Yeah, we do say in here that it's CRA. I think we just quoted that as the rate at the time of this writing, but it is based on CRA.
Okay, well, every time I claim the current year's rate, I'm told that it's last year's rate. Because that's in the policy. So that's interesting. I'm not going to back bill for my missed 1 cent a mile. But, so yeah, I think there's some opportunity to tighten up here. I mean, I think it's the sense, Fred, you missed the interesting part. and that was where we were asking, does the village want to reimburse employees and elected officials for their expenditure on alcohol on village behalf? For entertainment purposes, for swanning with the higher levels of government, yes or no? So on the nod, I think we all said, sure, why not? Why should somebody else absorb it? What do you think?
Well, I won't put in for it.
Yeah.
That's what I said.
Well, I won't be either, but that doesn't mean you shouldn't.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I guess it comes down to the mayor, and not just me.
Well, you're
but-
a primary representative, it's likely
Yeah.
going to be you.
Yeah, why do I have to
8 out of 10
absorb all that
times.
booze? Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah.
And when I was with the bank, it was always senior man pays.
Yeah, exactly.
Does this have anything to do with your talk last night about your neighbors falling in the ditch?
Um,
That's my neighbours.
So I think we're leaving this with staff.
Yeah, so I think
Sure.
the guidance is that we want to do away with this distinction for liquor. That's a long ago Puritan thing that doesn't have any place in Lions Bay. But I think we need clarification on this 1/3 and what is it actually for. My understanding always was that it was this non-taxable thing that the government said, you're a poorly compensated municipal official, we're going to give you 1/3 tax free. And it's nominally for the stuff that you don't claim. Which to my mind is only mileage. And I suppose phone, I don't claim for my phone use.
Paper, electronics, all this stuff.
We can certainly bring back a report at the October meeting with some,
I'm glad this has come up because we have been needing to tighten up. I actually sent to your predecessor, to Mandy, some suggestions on T&E. Not that we do a lot of travel, but you know, what do we travel on? If we fly on village behalf to Japan, which is very unlikely, but if we did, business class.
exactly.
So I'll look that up again and resend it to you so you don't have to find it.
It's time to update this. It's old,
Yeah.
for sure.
May I suggest this doesn't have to go to the next council meeting, go to the one after? I mean,
This is not pressing.
this
by
is
any
not
means.
pressing, so.
Yeah.
And then just on the council travel, currently the policy says council members may be reimbursed for casual kilometrage when required to travel outside the boundaries of the GBRD. So again, we haven't been enforcing this, but that's, I think the intent was if you were in, because historically, mayor and council have not claimed that, so it's something I'd like to clarify. I think, because that perception is what is your allowance for Metro Vancouver for? If it is for kilometers, that's why it wasn't allowed here.
I know it's
So-
not for kilometres because you're within your rights to claim for kilometres.
But who do you claim it from? Do you claim
From
it from?
GBRD, but I don't, I just
Right.
claim it from the village. I know Brenda used to claim from the GBRD.
No, I don't believe she did.
I know she did,
Okay.
because it's in the,
So
there,
may
so
I ask the
thing.
question why you wouldn't claim it from them, and you would claim it from us instead, because it's a very large sum of money given our budget.
Because you're our employee.
Yeah,
It's common practice to recover that from the regional district.
If we attend something that's not
That they
associated.
host.
Oh, if they host it.
well,
Council.
which is 5 or 6, 7, 8 meetings a month.
Well-
And sometimes in funky places, like Surrey. That's a long way away.
But that's not beyond the boundaries
It's-
of the GBRD.
No, that's within, so it's,
No.
You know, let's staff research this.
I'm happy to claim
Okay.
it from GBRD instead.
I think this is an important point, because it's an unbudgeted amount this year, which is, and it's really adding up. So if you can
Yeah.
claim it for GVRD, I think that would be my suggestion, and we'd keep this as is, that you would not claim mileage outside the GVRD. and
Well,
then
on
for Metro.
GBRD business.
Correct.
Pam, can you find a mechanism for that? I mean, you know, I don't,
I didn't think it's so much a mechanism, I was just asking.
Yeah, I don't know
Ms.
how you do it, but
Worship,
I'll find out.
if you would be comfortable with claiming it from the GVRD, would be my question.
well,
Because I don't want you to be out of pocket,
they'll
but if
pay
you're
it great.
comfortable to do that.
I certainly don't want to be out of pocket either. Costs enough as it is.
But you would be comfortable with claiming it then from Metro Vancouver GVRD?
Sure, yeah,
Okay.
yeah, it's just one more thing I'll put my staff onto.
Another question then. The meeting I went to at Green Timbers in Surrey today is within the GVRD, but not sponsored by Metro.
Well, exactly.
It's
So I don't like this
RCMP
either.
meeting.
Yes.
Yes.
Yeah, and certainly,
Again, that should be addressed in here, because then you're attending on behalf of the municipality,
Right.
aren't you? And in that case,
you have to pay to attend meetings, didn't you know that? You have to donate your car time.
I paid $8 for a parking ticket, and then I got in there and they gave me a free pass.
That often happens. Yeah. Oh, didn't you know?
Let's look
yeah,
at
so that's
updating this.
something
As
we
I say,
will look
it's
at
10 years
changing.
old.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, this no longer reflects how things actually work in the real world, so I think it's time. And I certainly, given the fact that our stipend is what it is, I really don't want council members, not only just us, but us in this case, to be actually funding our
Your
work
job.
for the village. Yeah. Okay, does that give staff enough to be going on? Great. Let's move on to staff requests from council. Now that is the stuff on page 13, but if I can just run through them quickly, we have resolution or recommendations for the first one, the second one, the third one, the fourth one as well, I believe.
So, Your Worship, I'm being new here. I'm going to play. I'm very ignorant of a lot of this. The MFA borrowing, what was that for?
We'll get to it, but that is on page 17. But just to tell you now, to answer the question, because of timing, we know that we're going to have CapEx coming up. Let's start the process. But this was for discussion by council whether we actually even want to do that.
So, it's not for a specific project?
It's for projects that we know will come out of the infrastructure master plan.
In order to borrow, you will need to identify specifically the project, the specific costs of the project, have your supporting studies, whatever you're going to need.
Okay, well,
have
that's,
it identified as a strategic priority. It doesn't meet the qualifications for borrowing at this point.
We'll discuss it when we get there,
Okay.
which is going to be next, more or less. The land use plan, did I write a recommendation on that one?
I think there was.
Yes, I did, so that's taken care of. The budget requests are taken care of. Finance, number 6, are taken care of. So the only one that stands without a recommendation right now is number 7. And Helen, that was yours.
Yeah, this was basically, we've had a lot of plans floating around, and I thought that this might be an opportune time to maybe prioritize them for this year, to go through this list and see which ones we want to attack and in what order.
Okay, well,
So
I can
for
address
sure,
some of those.
yeah.
The infrastructure plan is underway. I copied you on some of the results of the first report that we had from the, what do you call them, the provider, the proponent, the bidder? The engineer, the vendor, thank you, it is exactly that. So we saw them for the first time last night. I don't know that everybody was overwhelmed by the results so far. Right now it looks like we're going to get an inventory of potholes and as a risk analysis. So we have to sort of redirect that. I'm perhaps exaggerating slightly for effect, but that seemed to be the thing.
I think it came through in your email.
Yeah. Yeah, so I'm a little concerned that that's not what we get, and certainly not what we wanted. So
that would be one.
that's well in hand, being burnt on by the infrastructure committee. So I think that one's taken care of.
Mm-hmm.
Signs and signage is going to be a major part of one of my few asks for the budget, the 2016 budget. As you recall, we had quite substantial recommendation for sign review in the preliminary recommendations from the infrastructure committee. Okay, I'll send that to you. It's a long, long list. Always like to joke that one of the recommended signs is it is forbidden to throw rocks at this sign.
I like that.
You're gonna have to get that made. I don't know where we put it. But
So what would that entail? Would we have to hire a consultant? Is there cost associated with?
it's not my intention. I think public works staff will. It's stuff like, do we want to put a nice looking sign on the bridge abutment saying this is Harvey Creek, this is Magnesia Creek? Because I bet you 90% of the people in the village don't know what the names of the creeks are. Do they need to? Well, it's a quality of life thing. I think that we should put nice signs on the gates of our water treatment plants saying Harvey Water Treatment Plant, 1 million gallons per day capacity. there's justifications in the sign thing. I think if you've looked at it, it's a long schedule spreadsheet, and the justification is in there. Or some cases it's a safety thing, some cases it's village information, some cases it's buy-in, some cases it's reducing sign waste. And you only have to go to the little gate at the Magnesia on Sunset. There's about 18 signs that are unnecessary there.
Mm-hmm.
Some of them half falling off, some of them broken in half that says campfires. I think you pointed that out, rather than no campfires, etc., etc.
So is there already a plan in place and we just need to implement
No,
it?
there is no plan in place. It's still awaiting review by Public Works staff. I've sent it to Nikki quite a few times to remind her that it exists. Every time I add another little joke sign, just to check. But
So what is
laughs.
waiting review? Our whole
The plan.
village, the plan, so there is a.
No, the plan is merely a schedule of suggested signs.
Mhm.
Well, could we make it, if we do a plan, it would prioritize the must-haves versus the nice-to-haves?
I think that would be necessary. You know, I don't know what signs cost. You know, depending on the substrate, whether it's metal or plastic or core plast or whatever. But yeah, I think we have to prioritize.
And I'd put on that plan, get rid of those silly blue signs at the beach. You must launch your kayak within the logged area, but you can't launch it in the swim area.
Yeah. Somebody's gone in there with the black marker and changed that, by the way.
I didn't do it.
No. This one I can honestly say I didn't do.
So the status with this is to wait for Public Works to review?
Yes, in time for the budget. So it's a budget item. It will be a budget item.
It's a 2016 item.
Thank you, Carl. Councillor Watterson, I think these are 7 great topics. Thank you for bringing them forward. I think it's a little tough in the time that we've got today. And I think quite candidly it'll be a lot of paper, scissors, rocks amongst the council members to prioritize from 1 to 7.
Mm-hmm.
Really, a bunch of this, even as the mayor's partly involved and different people are involved in this kind of stuff, part of it's budget, part of it's forward planning. It might be that because they're all good topics that we kind of put a general calendar time on them and cover them all, because they're all good.
Well, yeah, I mean, some of them are underway. So as you see,
and to
this
that extent, you look,
the parking is
pick
the-
infrastructure ongoing.
yes, it's sign signage is a budget item for next year that I'm going to propose
So,
in the budget discussion.
First,
Parking is the
Q1
next
16.
recommendation. Emergency was done this year.
So-
It's only partway done though. We still haven't got our evacuation plan. We still haven't got the emergency planning committee up and running again.
Is that part? It was a $20,000 study, right?
Mm-hmm.
That we funded in its entirety. Do we
Mhm.
know? Is that right, Pam?
Yes.
It was not grant funded at all.
No.
It's not, is it complete?
He's done most of his work. He's yet to submit it.
Okay. Yep.
Is yet. I certainly
Did it
haven't been
include
asked
the
for.
evacuation plan?
Councillor Watterson,
No,
is
I didn't
something
think
that
so.
these 7
So
topics that,
it's-
I mean, to draw a subsection on each agenda just to cover them, so that we could apprise each other where we are with this? Like, for example, is Carl says the infrastructure's ongoing. I mean, the rubber will hit the road in Q1 2016 kind of thing, and that'll lead to a budget item throughout the rest of the year. Sign and signage, Works Department's got that. Parking,
We're going to talk about that next.
dear to our own heart. That's probably bylaw review and a whole bunch of stuff. It's really hard to prioritize these because at any given moment, any one of them are the number one.
I think they're all priorities, except perhaps the asset management plan.
Well, that was mine too, but I mean, are we talking
Yeah.
about the tanks?
Well, yes.
Yes.
I mean, that's part of the infrastructure
So-
plan as well. But Nikki has been going, you know, asset management is moving away from an age-based to a risk-based approach. And Nikki has been agitating to commence this project.
I think for me, this is a really good bunch of stuff, and
I think it summarizes more or less.
What are we going to address in 2016?
Yeah,
yeah.
yeah. If
With,
not
with
already.
with no more detail than what you've got there.
And any other plans?
Not off the top of my head.
No, so
If I could just ask, I think, my interpretation of what you are asking here is, do we actually have plans for these, or are these simply priorities or
yeah.
projects? And the way I interpret this is, which plans would you like to complete? Would you like to create a plan? Or are you asking, would you like to complete the task list that follows a plan?
I think these were actually actual plans that we needed, and once we have the plan, then we would action it.
Right. So you're looking at which one of these plans will be drafted, which ones of these plans, and what's council's priorities for the plan?
So the first step would be drafting a plan.
Okay. As opposed to the tasks,
Yeah.
it's the plans.
That's right. And so just to finish off on this list, the communication and resident engagement plan, I've addressed that with you to a certain extent, just touching on it. That includes a style guide. You know, we don't use the term X and we do use the term Y. Beach remediation plan, that's somewhat started. That was a budget item last year. Didn't make the cut, but we can perhaps now, as a result of the insurance adjusters review, some of it is now risk-based, and we're going to have to do something about it. Asset management, as discussed. The other plan that you didn't list here was a water shortage plan. That's well underway, coming out of the infrastructure committee. There may yet be more plans. Off the top of my head, I'm not thinking of any. I guess you could call the budget a plan, but that's sort of an ongoing every year thing.
I wouldn't put that on here.
Sponsorship plan?
Well, personnel, staffing is an issue right now. Trying to
Succession planning, yeah.
So,
especially
which
as
is beyond the people in this building.
Yeah, precisely. Yeah.
Well, one thing I would caution against of having too many balls in the air, just do as much as we can manage and see how it goes.
Well, that's where I was going on the calendar, thinking.
In many of these, I'm going to be looking to the individual portfolio holders to be coming up with a plan. So Fred's infrastructure portfolio, that's well underway. Signs and signage will be yours, and parking will be yours, as will emergency. So you've got the full four, thanks.
I've got signs.
No.
You don't think that's infrastructure?
No.
Goodbye blue signs.
Hey, you see, I like it, it's a
You just rip
plan.
it off.
Possibly even beach remediation. Any future asset management plan would be finance, water shortage plan, infrastructure. So these, you're right, so they all do need to be allocated to people. We don't have the plans today, well, we do have some of them.
Carry it forward. Let's
Yeah.
flesh it out, but it's there.
I think this is a good start to the plans that we do need. In fact, I'd like to see any more. So water shortage was one of them.
And
Yeah, in many
succession.
cases, they need a champion to start the ball rolling, as I did, for example, on the water shortage plan.
And some will also require expertise, as in having an
Absolutely.
expert.
The signs and
outside.
signage plan will need. I was hoping that the engineers would come up with, you know, there's best practices for signs.
I kind of assumed it was the communication person.
Oh, you did? You may be right on that one.
We work together.
Well, you know, welcome to Lions Bay. What does that look like? Is it that log sign down there? Is it a welcome to Lions Bay? Population 1,438 yesterday, we went counting. Yeah, there's a holistic sort of definition of what our signage looks like, what form it's going to take. Do we want lots of signs, little signs? I have heard quite a lot from residents that we have too many signs. I tend to agree. You know, do we, for example, to indicate part of the parking plan, do we have street signs? Do we paint stripes on the road? Do we have a single master sign at the entrance? What do we do? You know, those are sort of fairly high concept strategic things that need thinking through.
But it's good because right now, we all know who's responsible for what, so that we will be accountable for it to ensure that it happens next year.
I think that's right. Certainly the benevolent dictator / owner of these things needs to be allocated, and I think...
And you just done that.
And I think everybody understands who those are.
I'm not sure who's beach remediation.
It'll be me,
Okay.
simply because I've already done it. But, you know, that then takes... So, for example, we have 3 play areas there, if you remember. We have the newish one with the multicolored metal thing. Then we have the one next to it with the smaller thing with the bolts, resting bolts sticking out. And then we have swings down at the bottom, none of which meet current standard. The S-hooks are open, the cross piece is rusting. What's the plan? Well, that I need public works for. And all the landscape timbers are rotten, you know, so that now becomes a budget item. So it's as much a concept as what exactly are we going to be doing.
I think it's the champion you're looking for.
I think champion is probably the right word.
Champion's the
actually.
right term, because
Yeah.
if you were to allocate the names to this, then say that if you were gonna talk about beach remediation in the future, we'd be swiveling to the left here, or to the right on that side.
Yeah, yeah. So, I know I say this a lot. Leave this with me. I'm going to see about allocation, ensuring that we have.
Yep.
What's the term you just used, Ron?
Champion.
Champion. Thanks. Champions.
Plan champions.
Can we,
And champions.
in the effort of moving on, can we leave item 7 with the two of you?
Yeah,
Is that fine? Alan?
certainly.
Yep.
And I think the other ones that were, it was personnel and succession. And I think Anne, you had one too, I think. I know, okay.
Oh, yes, I was going to ask about asset management. Do we have a TCA plan, Pam?
No.
Okay, so the asset management, you'd be, there is grant funding available.
Mm.
It is infrastructure planning.
There is, yes.
And TCA plan, an asset management plan would have a lot of value to help you prioritize.
You know, we did a
Understand.
huge amount of work about 5 years ago when we moved into the amortization regime. BDO did, to me, it looks like pretty good work. They enumerated every single one of our assets. They signed a value. They signed a amortization schedule to. You know, that's the start right there.
Mhm.
The problem is
Absolutely.
changing that from an age-based to a risk-based thing. Nikki's well on top of that. I mean, you know, Nikki probably would be the staff champion of that one. Council, I don't know. Probably that's more a financial thing than anything.
There's still a bit of a leap from having the understanding what assets you have, their valuation, their life cycle, lifespan, and so on, to understanding how that translates to future capital requirements. Because what you would really want is a graph that helps you understand that in 2025 you've got some significant water infrastructure, or 2030 you've got.
Well, that is what
roads.
we want.
And
Because we want to turn our
understanding
5-year
that-
budget away from just a sort of a plugged.
Yeah, and then you begin to understand you are able to begin to see the synergies of multiple capital projects where you can gain some efficiencies by
You're right, and
seeing those critical points.
that puts another plan that I reminded that we've asked for is a 20-year budget. Ron.
Sure, I was just disturbed by the fact that CRA wants the vehicle allowance.
Another one, 20-year budget. The other one was a KPI report.
Is that a plan?
Maybe it's not a plan, but it's a schedule. Okay, so leave that with me. I'm going to allocate that to champions, plus a few more.
In concert with Councillor Watterson.
We can't allocate, don't add too much more, because we want to be able to complete it.
To actually deliver. Yeah, I understand. Okay.
And to understand the impact to staff, right? To
And that's the
resources.
constraint. Yeah, the constraint is often that it'd be nice to have, we just can't do it. Okay, so some of that will become clear, I think, from the results of the next few discussions. So, being the solid citizen that I am, I put these in the approved format as recommendations to council, but for initial discussion in this meeting. The first is to strike a parking plan select committee, which, as you know, is a resolution of council. I don't think anybody would disagree that it's time for a parking plan. I would say that's half the complaints, formal complaints that we receive as council and as an administration. I would suggest that rather than just doing it willy-nilly as a body of council or as a subset of somebody else, is to actually strike a committee. But I'm willing to hear different ideas, by all means, because Lord knows I don't need any more work. But how are we going to address our parking situation in a fair, broad, all-encompassing way?
Well, I think if you're going to do a committee, you should have some residents on it that have some interest in it.
Yeah, my intent would be that it's largely residents, which fits within the select committee format. Ron?
Not to, I guess, as an alternate for the mayor, and I guess my piece on the mayor being involved in as many committees as he is, there's only so many hours and days, and I worry that you will get thin not physically thin, because you could lose a few pounds, but.
Yes, that's true.
But in the bigger picture, so I think with Fred, I think the more and the diverse the community members, the better, because I think when it comes back to council, or there's an initial ask of council what their general sentiment is, it's either verified by the community, and there's some general direction given.
That's fine. I have no need to do this myself. The only reason I put myself down was to get it moving along. I've got several ideas, but I've already written them all down, so I'll be happy to submit that to the committee. Anybody else want to volunteer? If we think this is a good idea, that is. And also, put up your hands at once. Let's do it, Jim. Let's make Jim the chair.
I'll volunteer for it.
You know that this is going to be one of the toughest things done.
One of the three.
I'm just.
Your worship, just based on exactly that sentiment there, and based on the diverse complaints that come into the village office, you might want to consider hiring a consultant to manage that public consultation, because it will give you that objectivity.
Yeah, well, I don't know if the committee would actually recommend public consultation in terms of hearings and open meetings. I definitely think we need to get resident input, and there's plenty of people who have expressed interest.
Do we strike the committee first and see what they come back with, and then perhaps if there's no resolution or people can't agree or whatever, then maybe we go to a consultant?
You could do it any way you
For
like.
the plan, yeah.
But that's, yeah, that would be
I don't
one
think this is
option.
rocket science, and I think it's I would like, I suppose every community says this, I think Lions Bay is somewhat unique in that we have quite a few demands on our limited parking space from residents, from visitors, and from guests. Those are what I see as the three classes of parker. I think we have opportunities for revenue and regularizing. We just got a letter, as you'll see in the main meeting package, from a resident with some fairly valid drivers. The fact that the resident got a ticket is sort of neither here nor there.
Well, it's a very balanced piece of information, I think.
Yeah, it's another piece of information that we need to bear in mind, some of the demands that are changing. You know, the word is out that Lions Bay is a destination for multiple things: beach, hiking, nature loving.
Sliding.
Exactly.
I think unless the core theme, although the parking is multiple, but I think that, I can say it certainly for Fred and I, it was an issue last council, and I'm sure it was an issue for the council before that. This council has had a year that hasn't been very pleasant on parking. For me, if the information was available, I'd be looking to make decisions in the first quarter.
I agree. I want it done by next month,
to me,
next summer.
That's why I say it's like, it's a tough one, because my experience here is that while our residents are not like the Hatfields and McCoys, sometimes where some smaller streets will love parking on one side, not on the other, except that everybody lives on the other side. It's a tough deal, Helen, so I mean, I think, choose your committee people, but I'd be looking at the calendar and touching base with council.
Well, this is a council-appointed committee, so we have to, I mean, who would we actually...
Is it a select, I thought a select committee is not council-appointed.
No,
Standing is, right?
No, the way around.
Still a committee of council, so you would recommend from this meeting to your regular council meeting at which you would make the decision.
So which is the one that's ongoing?
Standing. That's set by the mayor.
That's set by the mayor, and select is set by council.
Mhm.
So which is the one where we might open it up to public and say?
Well, either.
I mean, this is the one-trick pony.
Mhm.
This one doesn't have a requirement to have as many elected officials as non-elected officials, which is the requirement standing committee.
Okay.
Frankly, I think the community charter got backwards, but that's next year's project to change the community charter. For now, we need to solve our parking problems, and I think we can do it. There's best practice that has been put in place by a lot of, let's call them tourist destination villages or seasonal destination villages, communities. I don't think this is going to be difficult. We just need to formulate it into a plan and implement it.
Would you think this actually would fall under bylaw, a lot of it?
Some of it will, in terms of enforcement, but more of it will be administrative.
I think that this is my sense, without predisposing what the group would think, is I think you're gonna come up with a silver bullet here.
Yeah.
And it's,
So for example,
it's gonna be painful.
one of the things that is obvious, and I still don't believe that we don't do it this way, is to have non-removable parking decals that are bought by residents. Okay, so in Lions Bay's case, it's going to be fairly nominal charge, $20, let's say. You don't just issue them, you have to buy them if you want them. But that's only to park in decal-only spots. So if you never go down to the beach, you don't need one. First of all, you don't buy one. Second of all, you don't have, let's just call there's not decals being gifted. I walked down from the Firefighters Day thing, parked almost in Brunswick Beach offline. I mean, I parked at the end of Lions Bay Ave and walked back and looked at everybody's decals. I would say half were
Red?
well, no, most of them were green, but half of them were borrowed. They were either sitting on top of the dashboard rather than on the window. A lot of them were tucked in to some other decal. They were not Lions
So
Bay
they're
residents parking there.
Transient decals.
They were gifted those decals because 2 come to every resident. So we issued 1,000 parking decals. I don't think we should be issuing them. We should come and get one, and it's tied to your license plate. Why? Because then we know you're a resident parking a resident spot, etc., etc.
Actually, can I rescind my offer to?
No.
I don't think I'm.
I believe it's in the minutes already. So
I was just going to say, to support what, you've been here a short time, our interim CAO, but having done bylaws over the summer, I think the biggest challenge will be you will never get agreement. It's amazing when people come in to complain about their tickets. We can literally have someone come in, complain about the ticket, and the very next person has exactly the opposite issue. We have residents who wish they could tow the cars themselves, don't want anyone to park here, and the next person is complaining that why can't I park anywhere I want? Like,
Yeah.
I think you will never make everyone happy, and I think, not to be negative, I think that's very important to know going in. I don't think there is actually a perfect solution.
I agree. I think what we need is a comprehensive plan. That's the plan. You don't like it? Very sorry, but that's the plan. So this resident complained about the fact that they got a ticket for parking in a no parking zone.
Well,
Yeah, you did.
Funny that.
oh,
Yeah, there's a reason for that. So I think there's too many holes. I would suggest that there's big opportunity for revenue, specifically in the hiking and the, let's call it the CN lot areas, etc., etc. Not to presuppose what the plan looks like.
Again, not to presuppose what the plan looks like, and not to sell either. But actually, I think, Helen, you would be a good candidate for chair, because
I agree.
I actually see communication more important than the actual effectiveness of the bylaw, because the bylaw officer is third party. It's going to happen, whatever it is. But it's a big cultural shift. Whatever, as I'm going to speculate, it's going to be a big change. And I think that by surrounding yourself with diverse opinion and subject matter experts, if you need anything on the financial side, I'd be glad to help you. But I think it needs a chair to run with it, and I think communication is going to be, if that's the yin, the communication is the yang for it.
Last term Scott did a lot of work on it. You might want to consult with him too. He had some pretty good ideas.
Maybe he might want to come on as one of our
Yeah,
committee member then.
for sure.
I think Joanne did a lot of walking from the prior council
Yeah.
too. And I'm sure there's others that have picked it up, put it down. And so you'd have data.
So who picked it up? Scott was looking after it?
Scott and
Scott
Joanne.
was last term.
Okay.
yeah.
I know Joanne also had a lot to do with it. They all had individual ideas. It needs to become part of a holistic plan. That becomes the plan. That addresses
And
everything.
they had data, or some form of data. And I know that Scott truly did walk the streets, and as Pam has said, it would be one neighbor is yes, next neighbor was no, next neighbor was yes, the next one was no.
We need a consistently fair plan that everybody understands and that there's rationale for.
And that's where I think the communication piece, I mean, that's, if the two of them are your project for the year, you'd be getting birthday presents from all of us.
Yeah, so I mean the recommendation is that councils establish a committee. I'm hearing that we should do that. Are you
Yes.
willing to give it a go? It's not going to be forever. It's going to be intense. And I'd like to be part of the committee, but not as chair. Because I agree with Ron. this is a consensus building exercise.
I could do the administrative role, but I'm just worried I'm not strong enough to be chair. When it gets ugly, I'm like, oh.
Well, then come back to council, put your hand up.
Don't make it.
One of the rest of us will take your spot.
I could try and get the ball rolling.
Good.
And
Okay, so let's bring that to
Helen, if you're
council then.
struggling and this isn't what you want when you're partway through, just come back to council.
Now, we have to nominate members, I believe.
That's sorry, Pam.
Not at this committee.
We don't have to.
Not at this,
we couldn't
not
do
at
it.
this meeting.
It'd be hard to put them forward, you.
I'm sorry, just Mayor Bird, the one point I had wanted to make, and I obviously will provide more details when the committee is selected. Parking is not a revenue opportunity. You don't make money on parking tickets. At West Vancouver, they had $400,000 worth of revenue, but their costs were close to 600, which is fine. But it's just understand the intent is compliance. It's a way of enforcing that.
I'm talking about parking meters.
No, I understand, but there was a comment made about a revenue-making opportunity.
How about parking
in terms
meters?
of- Yeah, but just in terms of the tickets, I'm not at all saying don't do them. No, you have to do them, but I think I've heard different things in different meetings too. There was a perception that we're writing so many more tickets, we'll make so much more money.
My intention is to write no tickets.
The administrative cost will always by far outweigh any revenue you get from parking tickets. So it's just a level of, just to understand that
Yeah.
before going in.
I think as a guideline, I would like the policy to, or the plan to be so, I hesitate to use the term bulletproof, but they're so good that there's no need for parking tickets.
We would all love that.
Yeah. So the revenue opportunity is for paid parking. So paid parking at the hiking, paid parking at the CN, paid parking wherever it ends up being, if the plan says there is opportunity for that.
Should there be no parking, we are still a welcoming village.
You
Well,
can come, but you can't
I'm
park.
sorry, not to
Please walk.
predispose.
I remind you that
Signage.
our Kelvin Grove residents would like that parking lot blocked off.
And
Or
I'm
some of them
sure-
would.
I'm sure others at the other end of the village would like the same thing.
So, Councillor Watterson, you had earlier on asked whether the committee might recommend that you go to a consultant. So that would be, if you're chairing this committee and the complexity of the issues is becoming far more, if the issues are far more complex than they appear on the surface and so on, the committee's recommendation certainly could be to come back and do a study or something.
And that's right, there may be a need to go to an expert.
Or it can be tied in with the OCP discussions that are gonna go and stuff like that. I mean, actually, kind of, some of these are very tied together.
And I would like to put out a call for volunteers,
Do it this Friday.
because, I think a lot of people would want to, but ultimately we get to select who we want
Absolutely.
on it. But if they forward their,
Let's put out the call in the village news, the village update
Okay.
this Friday. And ask for people to say why they would be a good choice.
If I could recommend that this is, that we draft an application form with just a few key pieces, and that we ask anyone interested to submit an application, and if there are more than what would be manageable on a committee, then it would be up to, well, even if, regardless.
There's your second round of database.
Yes.
If the committee wants to
Absolutely.
not go public, but wants to go to the next layer of the onion, they could
Then-
they could be your study group.
Yeah,
Yeah, I like
but
that.
but
Do you
committee,
have
but
to-
council would review those
Applicants.
applicants
would
at a closed
would you
meeting.
happen to have a template?
Template?
Yeah,
Sure.
excellent.
Good. Can we have that ready for Friday? It's not
Today's
r-
Tuesday, probably.
It's not really, because the appointment will take place next council meeting.
Well, the message goes out Friday and you might not get anything back.
Well, I'm saying that it could also go out next Friday.
Yeah.
If
Yeah.
necessary. You will be available for next council meeting, right, Ron?
Yes.
Which is the first Tuesday of October, so it's 3 weeks.
Just yes, I'll still be.
She'll be thinking Hawaii.
Let's remember to bring this to the council meeting, the regular council meetings, that select committee can be struck, and Councillor Watterson can be appointed as the chair there.
So it's coming. It's going to be Business Horizon, yeah. Tomorrow, tonight. Okay, so we'll move on that one. I think I see the nods around, so we will strike that committee with Helen as the chair and go from there. Okay, so the next recommendation that I've made is for the MFA application. We already heard somewhat from Anne that that may not be feasible. Just run through between the two of you. What's the timeline on MFA applications?
We have a spring and a fall borrowing, and the general understanding is it takes about 6 months to apply. So I'm sort of thinking the earliest we could would be fall 2016. We'd have hopefully some results from the infrastructure master plan. The key is knowing what project, because you have to pass bylaws. The project itself has to be approved by the MFA, and you have to go to the public, not necessarily in a referendum, but there has to be some sort of...
The alternative approval
Yes,
process, if not.
yeah.
And so the fall and spring deadlines you speak of, is that for the application, or is that when you start the process rolling?
Basically, for the fall borrowing, if you wanted to borrow money in fall 2016, the deadline to have everything in is approximately spring 2016.
Yeah.
So it takes about
Okay, so
6
that's the one
months.
I'm talking about.
It'd be spring 16 for fall 16.
Yeah. And so the theory is that we would have our ducks in a row for the
Yeah.
spring. Is there a specific date? March 31 or?
I would have to look it up. We're
Yeah.
just sort of doing ballpark
Yeah.
here, and that would be tight. I mean, we'd have to
Yeah, I know.
identify the project, and it's the part going to the public that can be time consuming. And if the public says no, then you're stopped in your tracks.
Yeah, well, I think the intent and our fond belief is that the public will say yes, because that's what we think we've been elected to do, is to start addressing infrastructure things.
Which nicely ties into the communication. I mean, it's all about how you communicate and...
You could also do it in 2 tranches, which would make sure we could go to the AAP.
Yeah, so just tell us about that. We make an application in the spring, we get awarded, we get told yes in the fall. Do we then have to fund that loan and start paying interest on it, or do we get to draw it over X number of quarters?
There's a bylaw, and again, I've never done this before, there is some research required, but at a very high level, you pass a bylaw and you set a limit that you can borrow up to, but you don't have to borrow all of that at the same time. And then when you go to the MFA, you can get approval for X amount, but you don't have to draw on that all the first time.
So you segregate projects and then tranche it within a
And
project.
are the tranches annual, quarterly,
That
monthly?
I'm not sure if I'd have to.
Okay, I've got,
I believe it would be semi-annual.
Healy gave me some schedule
There's a
stuff, which I'll
spreadsheet.
give to you, and it kind of shows the steps, but I think that's the general timeline, is the timeline, as Pam says, is cast, but leading that would be the project, so
Yeah.
as the consultants come forward, then I guess you have to cost it too, a good job at costing it.
Yes.
So there's the recommendation, the costing, the study, and then the financial piece, that's right off our annual report, so that's...
Yeah, well, the deal is that the IMP is supposed to be delivered by late November, specifically to meet our budgeting timeline. I would like to think that by the MFA spring deadline, we will have at least some projects, if indeed there are any projects we wish to fund, because we are talking about an unknown future for the New Building Canada Fund granting. It's possible that by then they will have announced that 2/3 funding is newly available. There's some hints to that effect, but maybe not. So we would have to make allowance for the fact that we either fund the thing completely ourselves, in which case it's a, well, we'll soon discuss what the number is, but it would have to be a pretty vital project for us to pay for ourselves, or we'd be hoping for 2/3 funding from...
Or a small project.
Or a small
and
project.
we do the AAP, and we get the ball rolling, and then roll the thing.
Yeah.
Small project, if you do short-term borrowing, you do not need to go through all these steps.
Yeah.
Short-term
Okay.
borrowing is a different animal than
Is that through the
long-term borrowing.
MFA as well?
It is
Yeah,
through the
I've got that
MFA.
too.
Yeah, you've often mentioned that.
Yeah.
So then the question is, to what level are we prepared to request funding? And that is done as a cap on our,
Overall.
is it assessment? Percentage of assessment value, or percentage of tax base, or percentage of what?
You have what's called borrowing power.
Yeah, what's
And
that?
Yeah, I'd have to look it up.
Well,
There's a
yeah,
formula and there's a
a
calculation.
lot of
It's-
factors that go into that calculation.
My understanding it was
comes out
it's
of
some
your,
percentage of your last year's tax bill.
It's more complicated
Is
than
it?
that.
It's
Okay.
much more
Yeah,
complex,
quite
and
a
you're
bit more
actually given the
complicated.
number based on us doing our SOFR reports last year. We could get that number, which is the starting point, and then from that flows what your borrowing capacity
This
is.
would be part of the stuff that we want to get done when we get our next quarterly our quarterly statement next, so we can start the ball rolling early on this, because it leads to so much planning that even at the council level where you're not specific, it gets going.
You have to do this somewhat chicken and egg, otherwise you'll never get anything done. So the question is, are we prepared to borrow up to our cap? Or is that too rich for Lions Bay? Because right now, I think, anecdotally, I seem to recall that we're at 50% of our cap, 50% of our borrowing
Okay.
max. But that was based on a very long ago tax raise. Things have changed in the 5, 6, 7 years since we last borrowed.
We could have the number at the next meeting, and I think if you'd like, I'll draw that as a heading.
Yeah, so I mean,
it's a philosophical piece.
it is philosophical, but I would like us to be in some sort of form of consensus that we are prepared to consider borrowing, and then, if we are, how much? Because that's where the rubber hits the road.
Mayor, I'll have the background data for next meeting, which will show the footprint, show the calculation, and I'll put it in a fashion of discussion for agreement to a level of X.
That sounds like a good discussion for your budget discussions too.
But doesn't that also depend on the project? If it's
Yeah.
if it's a must do, then we would want to borrow. We would want to ensure that it's done. But if it's sort of like, well, we can
Well,
hang
you're
in
getting
there.
your financing first. Mentally,
Really
you're
isn't.
getting your financing first. The projects haven't come along, but council has agreed that, there's our number. So then whoever's making the recommendation on the projects is going to have to show the priority.
Okay, so what I'd like to do then is to have, and I think we have it, a consensus that by next meeting we will know where we stand in terms of our borrowing capacity, and to have staff continually on top of that so that when the IMP comes out, and if there are any projects that are identified as vital, I didn't get the sense there were going to be, but we could be wrong, it's also somewhat predicated on the availability of grant funding. Now, the main grant that we're talking about is the New Building Canada Fund. In theory, that's closed for further applications until future notice, but maybe it opens. We don't know. They can never tell us. The government may even have changed.
I'll
It
carry
will
this
open.
forward as unfinished business, and even if it's just a thing, it's there. Certainly, I think the next 3 or 4 months is critical.
Good. Okay, so I don't think we need I don't think we need to bring that forward. So we'll leave that one. The next recommendation I had was financial reports. We've seen these. I want to start putting an expectation in place to get some sort of handle on financial numbers. Ron?
Thank you. I think the document page 19 and 20, just to do the easy part first, I think the page 20 is some SOFI calculations. So I think where that gets worked into the annual report, I think that's fine. I don't have any disagreement with that,
Although I wouldn't like it only on an annual basis.
Depending on which of these particular ratios you're talking about, the relevance, depending on the relevance is changes over quarter. An example
True.
being
Yeah.
total cash and temporary investments after we've just received all of our tax money to operating expenses is a skewed number. Versus if you followed it annually and said, okay, it would imply then that we usually run our cash down by the end of the calendar year with 5 months to go before the bulk of our revenue comes in.
Yeah.
So, these are all good questions. I don't have any issues with them. In terms of, as I said to you earlier today, Carl, if I had, 15 minutes and 2 coffees, I could probably calculate it myself.
Precisely. So, the idea here is to establish a timeline or a deadline, I suppose, rather than timeline, for some of these things to be delivered.
So my ask on this, on the first piece, is that the council has faith with me that I think we all know what we want, which is reporting, and the CFO has been wearing 2 hats and sometimes 3 hats, and just hasn't had the time. But I think have the general view, and for the interim CAO and the CFO to concur, I think what we're looking at is September the 30th, 45 days thereafter, and then quarterly in perpetuity, 45 days after the quarter, and the financial statements and a battery of data would start coming as a normal.
Yeah, for financial statements, I'm cool with that. Some of these things, like the assessment report, that's for the 2015 assessment that happened in January. You know, there's no need to delay the 30th of September.
No,
I understand resource limitations, of course.
Financial reports, yes, but different projects. So I think
Yeah.
we'd look to split them.
You know, I'm looking for some high-level comfort numbers to understand where we are. I mean, I guess really, you know, I keep going on about my my Tibet analogy, which is you eventually realize you must stop telling the gardener what flowers you want planted and just say the garden is not beautiful, and then you'll come back to a beautiful garden in the Buddhist sense. Our financials are not complete. Because council is flying blind. You know, we haven't seen. I would only hope that staff have some means to understand where we are against budget right now, because council certainly hasn't seen that. It's 9 months since the last BVA we've seen, which was the 2014 BVA.
My understanding is there's a resolution that the third quarter and 45 days thereafter will be the next report. Is that correct?
Is there? Did we resolve that?
I'm smiling because I don't think there was a resolution, but I think it's a foregone that it's going to happen.
Okay,
Okay.
so that's 45 days from the end of September. So that means in
November 15th.
1 month.
middle of November, we will see the first financials since December 31.
Well, Carl, we have to accept that. That's benchmark. That's day one, and then we go on from there.
That's fine. Now, somewhat related to this, but and I'll just interject. We 2 or 3 meetings ago resolved some KPIs.
The ones that you sent electronically?
Yeah,
That
yeah.
was the...
Very simple ones like page views and all that kind of stuff, but largely financial.
And I think you were looking, staff can look back, but I think we'd given them till the middle of February, middle of November for that too.
Did we?
It
I've
was the
done
end
it.
of the year, actually.
Was
Because
it?
it's,
Okay.
we haven't even determined which KPIs and which ones are obtained. Well, there just hasn't been time
Yeah.
over the summer.
Could,
End of the year was the deadline.
okay,
Okay.
could staff resend that just so we refresh back to
It's-
us, or I'm not sure if it appeared in the minutes somewhere.
I presume it would have, because it was a resolution.
It wasn't a resolution, it was just, it came up in an outstanding item, and we
As an
said,
action item.
we deferred it as an action item, we deferred it to the end of the year.
I'd have to look.
I believe it was a resolution. I'm going to search up the word resolution on KPIs.
In any case, it's a carry forward.
Yeah, it is. Okay, that was neither here nor there. I just want to know where we stand. Okay, I'm fine with that.
So for this, somewhat within the spirit of what you've asked for here, in my ongoing stuff, which would be my more involved period on the financial aspect over the next couple of months, is that we'll split this out between what is truly financial day-to-day and budget-related versus some of the other asks that you've asked. I'm just looking at the assessments and the different things like that, which is financial data, but it's not budget or other. It's a specific task.
Yeah, some of these things may appear somewhat arbitrary. They're not. So, for example, the assessment is a long-term strategic thing that we need to understand where Lions Bay is headed. That's why I'm looking for trend reports. You know, what are price trends in Lions Bay? Where are the opportunities for increasing the tax base? If that is indeed council's aim, I believe it is. You know, I believe this council was elected to commence the transition between pioneering Lions Bay and future Lions Bay. And that entails increasing the tax base. So these are all towards that.
Carl, as with the piece on the priorities, I'd propose that we carry this as unfinished business so it doesn't get lost, and I'll cover some of it the next meeting.
So you want to put this forward as a resolution?
I'm not sure how I'm going to style it for that.
Okay, so I'll leave this with you for
Leave it
tonight's
with me.
meeting.
At the very least, it's going to appear as unfinished business at the next council meeting.
Everybody good with that?
Should we discuss
Yeah, well,
between the
it's
three of
enough.
us?
Yeah.
That'll
Let's
become an
review.
admin thing then, yeah.
Yeah.
Perfect.
I mean, some of this stuff is not feasible, not necessary.
Well, and that's, the aim would be to mesh staff's time and deliverables.
Good. Okay, almost the last one. Board of Variance. We've seen a little bit of correspondence going back and forth on the Board of Variance. Very easy to do research shows that the BOV is in fact a council appointed body. That's how it is. in a community of our size has got 3 members. They choose their chair. They have a 3-year term. Appointments can be changed at any time by council. Whether we do that or not, it's a whole different issue. This may or may not be a closed item, in fact. But do we want to do anything about the Board of Variance in light of recent developments? The fact that I couldn't actually tell you off the top of my head who's on the Board of Variance. It was apparently appointed by council. So says the Local Government Act. It must have been a long time ago, before all of our times.
Are there terms of reference? Are there terms for each of the appointees?
I know who they are. Until recent events, I presumed this was not a municipal appointment. I thought it came somewhere else because their decisions were at arm's length to us. We just were copied reports as a courtesy. No influence, no, as we've seen more recently, no recourse to council. And I think he very nicely worded it about scrutiny. The issue concerns me, and I think we should retrack on this one and go down to ground zero, which is I think where you're trying to go.
So I'm asking for a report, yeah, that we receive a report on the Board of Variances, members and their terms. Terms of reference would be good as well as their decisions. There haven't been many.
I don't think this. I'm kind of thinking. I think they'd be maxed out at 2 a quarter.
Yeah, if that.
So their decision since when?
Since 1/1/13 is what I said. Yeah.
Well, I'm kind of curious on the driver on this, in that for the longest time there's been no issues, and then we have the issue on Bayview Road that stirred up a bit of concern. Whether I agree with their decision or not wouldn't spur me to question the members of the Board of Variance at this point. Both being neighbors and everything, we got a little bit of tension there. But I don't necessarily blame it on the Board of Variance. One of the participants had his opportunity to speak to the Board of Variance and didn't show up. And so if he isn't going to represent himself, how are the Board of Variance going to take his position or carry it? So, as much as the guy's a neighbor of mine, I think if you don't show, you lose in court, as it were. Yeah,
I mean, that's true, although this is not a court. The duty of a Board of Variance is manifold. It's established in the community charter. It says what their job is, which is to determine hardship and make decisions taking into account, I'm not sure that I actually said it here. No, I didn't. I think I may have said it in an email to you guys. Their role is to protect the rights of the neighbor. The neighbor is not required to show up, or any interested party. The fact that the neighbor didn't show up is neither here nor there. If the Board of Variance felt that it was correctly addressing hardship, and presumably that's what they felt they were doing, by giving in this particular case an 11-foot allowance, a height variance, fine, that's the decision. If the neighbor doesn't like it so much so that he wants to go further, his next step of recourse is to go to the Supreme Court of BC. That's all he can do. There may be some liability that accrues to Lions Bay, I don't know, but that would come out in the process because it is a body of Lions Bay. I think the discussion is perhaps a wider one, and that is to do with enforcement of the building code, enforcement of our building bylaw. Our building bylaw probably has some holes in it because it's old. You've seen the things that I've been putting forward in terms of driveway steepness allowance, accelerated construction schedule, permitting fees, so on and so forth. I don't know if there's anything to be done in this particular situation that sort of engendered the discussion. Up until then, I've heard not one word of complaint from the Board of Variance.
No, I'm of the same view as you, Carl. I think that this particular event occurred in the prior council. I mean, it didn't come out until now, and let alone the damage is done here. But what I have observed since there's been greater scrutiny is that their decisions are not unanimous, and their decisions have ramifications. And I haven't even looked at the terms of reference for them. How is it that an independent body that we have appointed can make things that are contrary to our community? I don't understand that. And now we're having to deal with the aftermath. So I think letting staff do their piece here is probably the appropriate thing to do. Also, it's the issue of succession, where's the 3-year review in this? I mean, truly, I don't know if they've been in place six years or not.
Well, you guys certainly didn't appoint them. You would have been had they been appointed. So we know they've been there
4.
minimum,
Yeah.
and perhaps longer, which may or may not be the case. I copied you on an email sent by one of the involved neighbours.
The other one.
The other one, in which it suggested that the Board of Variance members are professionals. One lawyer, one architect, and one, what was the other one? Something like that.
One's a retired engineer, one's an architect, and one is a lawyer.
So we actually have that. And I think, I think we should be grateful to them for being willing to continue to serve as long as they have. It's interesting to me that the decisions aren't always unanimous. It would seem to me hardship needs to be proved. In this particular case, for example, I don't believe it was not proved that the applicant had the medical condition on which basis they were claiming. Don't know.
It's quite unique that a committee can make a binding decision on behalf of the village without coming to council when they may not be unanimous. And it has huge ramifications, or could have huge ramifications.
I think unique is not strong enough a word. I think it's asinine.
So
I think yet another flaw in the community.
And I don't know, and actually for me, I don't have enough exposure on this, what the story is in other communities. Do they outsource to professionals? Do they have, or I guess they've got their own planners.
Do you know, Anne?
I don't know. Anne?
Well, I'm sure they take advice from their planners. We don't have such a thing.
Okay, well.
Correct. A Board of Variance is typically internal to the community.
Reporting up, or even if it wasn't reporting up, it would be advising, seeking guidance, trying to get a broader sense here. I mean, when you, I understand the part about being subject matter experts, and maybe you've seen 300 situations and they're all like that. I'm sure Dave Butler would be a good example of that. Board of Variance, I don't know.
My understanding is, and this is speaking from a very superficial review or understanding of these past cases, is that the board followed protocol in achieving or arriving at their decision. But why don't you let staff do some investigation and bring back this report on the terms of reference.
That's a start.
Perhaps
yeah.
some benchmarking.
Yeah, maybe even that, because I don't know how far that will get us, and I don't even know if anything's broken.
Exactly.
Well, I'm not sure what our ultimate objective is. To me, this is a knowledge thing. I'm curious on a whole bunch of things here.
Yeah, I think many of us have some degree of understanding of the nature of the complaint, which is that an 11-foot height variance was allowed, according to protocol, apparently. That came as a bit of a surprise to the neighbours. The Board of Variance adjudicates hardship, so they presumably felt that was a hardship, and that allowance was needed.
Conversely, my neighbour also claimed a hardship situation, to the best of my knowledge, and the Board of Variance was to tear it down.
They actually ordered, I don't think they have that. Maybe the building inspector then has.
Well, I think that there was a liaison between the two groups, but I think through massaging, the building inspector found a more common ground, which was acceptable, but the original reply was tear down. So, I guess for me, Carl, it's that if these situations are out in the village and it's the people are appointed, regrettably through your good graces, or by their continuity, it'd be nice to know that somebody's shooting live shells out there.
Precisely. I mean, the liability of the village in these cases is substantial. It's up to 75% of the value of the property, not the changing value of the property, the value, from the ground up or from the foundation up or something. So it behooves us to find out. So you've got enough to go on there, Anne?
Yep,
and
for sure.
And it may well be that our good and absent colleague, Mr. Hughes, gets another assignment once we have some information.
I'd say we do it now. But let's first receive the report. Do we need a resolution for that, or are you able to do that administratively?
We can absolutely bring this forward without a resolution. So far, I think we only have one going to the council meeting tonight,
That's good.
right?
Okay, and then my final recommendation is the land use plan. Again, I'm simply seeking information. The basis for making all these recommendations for resolutions is that we've been advised on occasion that in order to get anything done requires a resolution of council. If that's not indeed the case, that's great. Very pleased to hear that. If we can receive a staff report administratively on the current status of the land use plans, that's great. What came out of this, Fred and Ron are the guys who will provide the input. Previous council
The work was done, it was tabled prior to election. So it's sitting there waiting to come back.
I think tabling has a 1-year statute of limitations on it. Is that about right?
Oh boy, now you're testing me. I had a quick question for you. Was it tabled in anticipation of the OCP review, or what was
No, new council.
New council.
No.
Okay,
Well,
okay.
yeah, if I could add, last council passed it on to the next council with no strings attached.
Okay.
Here we've provided a report,
Okay.
and the next council, with a message to the next council, do whatever you wish to do with it. There is no expectation from the last council onto this council.
I believe the only limit, if indeed it is a limit, is I think there's a year after tabling. Deferring is different, correct?
Deferring is different, you're correct, yes.
Was it tabled or was it deferred?
It's tabled.
Okay, so I believe we have to,
I don't recall.
well, maybe we just need a report on that.
Oh, okay, and it's also
Let's-
there too, there's actually a hard asset.
Was a land use plan completed?
No, it was
Okay.
only ever a draft.
It's a draft.
Okay,
And it was never adopted.
It
So
was
it's not
just
a plan.
received.
It was received.
Yes.
okay, okay. Well,
So-
that's,
I mean, ultimately, I would like to resurrect this thing. Now, I'll just bring you up to speed. It caused
please.
major ructions in the village. You guys can probably talk to it.
Well, I mean, the reality is it came at an election time too. It was progressive people, or, I mean, which we've seen as first time people have come forward asking for subdivision and rezoning. Okay, well, had they done that then, they probably would have been lynched
Tarred
on
and
the
feathered,
way
yeah,
out.
yeah,
So
yeah.
there's an example how things have changed, and we know that there are other rezoning out now. So, I mean, just from the, hitting the top 4 or 5, what was unpalatable then is probably going to be faced by this council, so the timing is good.
yeah, okay.
The timing is nigh. The challenge there was the process, which was very well started by council. They had a very good consultant in play. There was a public consultation process. There was a presentation. That process unfortunately got hijacked, de-agendarized, and the incorrect message went out by
Council, the prior council needs to own that.
Yeah.
Carl. I mean, that was,
not all members of the prior council, but
the best PR piece for that, or even the best basic information, was poorly presented, poor logistics to the presentation. I mean, it was just an open pit.
it engendered this massive backlash. People were saying, "You are going to bulldoze my house to build condos," and what do you mean 500 houses could be built in Lions Bay in the next
And also
year?
the times have changed now, because we've dealt with a bunch of the water issues that were the issue, that were the red herrings across the path then too. So I think it's a good time to bring it forward, and it's all going to be part of the OCP one way or the other. So.
Precisely.
Yeah.
So it's timely for the OCP.
Sure, we'll take a look at finding that and
Wonderful.
bringing that forward to this council.
Okay, no resolution then on that one. That's good. Public questions and comments? Then we move on to the next and final item on the agenda, which is resolution to close the meeting. So, Anne, what's your opinion? Do I have to read this entire thing out every time, or can we just go for a resolution to close the meeting? And do we actually make resolutions in?
You should not be making resolutions. I'm really intrigued by this format for a committee of the whole meeting, because it's an unusual
Can we
format.
indeed even have a closed session in committee of the whole council?
That would be, I would probably have to ask that question of the ministry, because I don't know that it's one of those unusual situations.
Okay, so we'll just declare that we're closed. Everybody who shouldn't be here should not be here now. There'll be a test later.
And if you answer,
Yeah, now we're recording. So we've reverted to open meeting, and the sole remaining item on the agenda is adjournment. No motion, do it on the nod. Meeting adjourned at 5:27.
okay.
Thanks. See you all at 7.
I'm gonna grab Pam for a second. Can I just get together with the two of you?